Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates spread around the globe. This is the Friday it gets serious, I'm afraid. Coronavirus. I'm afraid it's breaking into markets and that we're going to have another rough day. Another rough day after a rough day yesterday. Market reports are always brought to you by Andrew and Todd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, very good friends of mine. The only people doing box office business right now are people who buy in a house. The 10-year Treasury is down to 1.52%. That's so low. By the end of the day, it might cross into 1.4% territory. That's not the interest rate you get on your house, but, man, it means people are going to be buying houses this weekend. AndrewandTodd.com are the place to do that, 888-1172. Yesterday, if you were watching the markets were totally calm. Totally calm. And then all of a sudden they fell dramatically. Then they recovered. They ended up being off 128 points yesterday on Thursday. They were down 66 points on Thursday. They were off 12 points on Thursday. Overnight, the Hong Kong index dropped another 1%. And I got up to read bad story after bad story after bad story. It's like the world is finally waking up to what I first told you about early in January. I always keep my eye on the virus because I've read The Great Influenza by John Barry. I know about the 1968 flu. I know about pandemics. And I know that they are considered inevitable, and one will come. And what turned out not to be the bird flu, SARS was a little bit scary, but they contained it. MERS was scarier. They contained it. Ebola was the scariest. They contained it. They have not contained coronavirus. And markets are beginning to notice 76,790 cases. 2,249 people died. And the world is finding themselves with new cases everywhere. Hubei, which is the home of Wuhan, Hubei province, revised their daily numbers up. 631 cases following deaths in a jail. That followed downward reports in Happy Talk. And I warned you earlier this week, do not believe in Happy Talk. Happy Talk will kill you. Then South Korea got its own outbreak. They canceled the Davos of Asia. The Boao Forum is held annually. Big deal. Regional business and political elites come to the island of Hainan. Not this year, March 24th to 27th. It's canceled. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. It really is just the tip of the iceberg. The manufacturing supply chain is pummeled from all sides, according to the South China Morning Post. All across China, the goods you expect routinely to show up in Walmart in the United States are not being made. That has ripple effects throughout the economy. And people worry now about how long does it last on surfaces. The 1918 virus lasted many days. We don't know. People wonder, how long are you contagious? We don't know. Michael Gerson has a great Washington Post column on this. And it's reassuring that the death rate is only 2%. Now, the flu is 0.07%. But SARS was 10%. But we don't know if that's the real death rate. We do know, as The Guardian reports this morning, in this My Morning Rundown, coronavirus air travel demand will fall for the first time in 11 years. Mark Sweeney's story. The spread of the coronavirus will result in the first fall in global air travel in more than a decade. The International Air Transportation warned that falling passenger demand as a result of the outbreak of COVID-19 would cost the airline industry £29 billion. From the Telegraph, Ambrose Evans pictured dominoes falling in global shipping as coronavirus continues to grip China's economy. Container shipping from China ports has collapsed since the outbreak of coronavirus, has yet to show any sign of recovery. Almost half of the planned sailings on the route from Asia to North Europe have been canceled over the last 4 weeks. Half! Refrigerated food, ships full of frozen food known as reefers are unable to enter Chinese ports. The backups are terrible. Ben from the Financial Times. Coronavirus wreaks havoc on luxury and fashion groups. The coronavirus has kept as many as 1,000 Chinese fashion buyers from Europe's top fashion shows this month, as the luxury industry faces its biggest threat since the 2008 financial crisis. All right, then you get this. Coronavirus infected Americans flown home against the CDC's advice. This is one of those stories. It's by Lena's son, Lenny Bernstein, Shabani Matani, and Joel Achenbach in the Washington Post. In the wee hours of a rainy Monday, more than a dozen buses sat on a tarmac at Tokyo's airport. Inside, 328 weary Americans wearing surgical masks and gloves waited anxiously to fly home. But as the buses idled, U.S. officials wrestled with troubling news. New test results showed that 14 passengers were infected with the virus. The U.S. State Department had promised that no one with the infection would be allowed to board the plane. A decision had to be made. Let them all fly or leave them behind in Japanese hospitals. Before I turn the page, how hard of a decision is that? Do not let them fly. In Washington, where it was still a Sunday afternoon, a fierce debate broke out. The State Department and a top Trump administration health official wanted to forge ahead. The infected passenger had no symptoms, could be segregated on the plane in a plastic-lined enclosure. But officials at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention disagreed. The CDC believed the 14 should not be flown back. It was like the worst nightmare, said a senior official involved in the decision. The State Department won the argument, but unhappy CDC officials demanded to be left out of the news release that explained that infected people were being flown to the United States. The tarmac decision was a pivotal moment for U.S. officials improvising their response to a crisis with few precedents. Now, I don't know how much of this to believe. I often say I believe that the people told the Post this because the Post is very good and accurate in reporting what they are told. But we do not know motive. It could be 180 degrees backwards. It could be that the CDC pushed to bring them home and the State Department said don't, and then the CDC covered their butts. That happens all the time. What I do know, we need to know the exact facts of that call, and we need a defined protocol ASAP. President and his entourage leave for India on Sunday. They need to leave behind instructions on what to do. Because believe you me, there are people who hate Trump so much they will screw this up just to make him look bad. May I bring to your attention the non-story that President Trump was upset with the former acting DNI, Joe McGuire, has been replaced by Rick Grinnell, because Joe McGuire let a staffer go to the Hill and deliver a briefing on Russian interference in the 2020 election before he gave it to the president. Guess what? That is entirely appropriate. The DNI and everyone who works for the DNI reports to the president and answers to Congress. The president controls them. He gets input into that briefing. He gets to know before they tell the Congress what they're going to tell the Congress. Now, it's not often that the president actually cares what members of the executive branch, Article 2, are saying to Article 1. But you know he cares about this subject, and they didn't tell him. So did McGuire get chewed out? Yes. Was that appropriate? Yes. When we come back, we turn to Donald Trump. But that is this morning's rundown. It's bad with the coronavirus. It's getting worse. I think this is the weekend and the week ahead where we come to grips with the fact of what it's done to the world economy and what it will do in the weeks and months ahead. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Heading off to the Beltway after the show. I will be on Meet the Press this Sunday. I hope you'll tune in. Michael Bloomberg attempted to put a tourniquet on his political bleeding yesterday. He gave a speech in Salt Lake City. Here's what he had to say about who the big winner was in the debate, cut number 2.
Look, the real winner in the debate last night was Donald Trump. Because I worry that we may very well be on the way to nominating somebody who cannot win in November. And if we choose a candidate who appeals to a small base like Senator Sanders, it will be a fatal error.
A fatal error. I love the New York accent. He went on. Cut number 3.
Others talk about fighting climate change. I cut New York's carbon footprint by 13% and helped create a grassroots movement to close more than 300 polluting coal-fired power plants across this country.
Really going to help him in Pennsylvania. Now, they don't vote till April, so it'll be over before then. But, you got West Virginia, you got other coal mining states out there that heard that. You're bragging about closing coal-fired plants. Then Mike Bloomberg talks about impeachment, cut number 4.
And then in 2018, I worked to help hold him accountable by flipping 21 House seats and making Nancy Pelosi the Speaker, and that's what started the impeachment process. But since the Republican Senate didn't have the courage to remove the president from office, it is up to us to do that this November.
It's a charisma deficit. Can you hear the energy sucking out of me listening to him? Hear the show collapsing around. I can't play him anymore. The show will collapse. He did do an ad. It was totally edited, totally manipulated. I'll play you the ad. This is not in real time because they had to add a lot of real time to it because Mike Bloomberg has no dramatic sense of timing, or he would have done it the right way the first time. Here is the edited ad, cut number 5.
I'm the only one here that I think that's ever started a business. Is that fair? Okay.
That did not happen. So what do you think about that? That's fake news. That did not happen. He edited the video to create a dramatic moment. It did not happen. I think that tells you Michael Bloomberg's in serious, serious trouble. But Joe Biden is always there to help him. Cut number 11 from the CNN town hall last night.
By the way, nobody, and some of you are going to get mad at me with this, but nobody is going to be deported in my first 100 days until we get through the point that we find out the only rationale for deportation will be whether or not you've committed a felony while in the country.
No one being deported for 100 days. Even if you show up at the border and you don't even pretend to ask for asylum. That's Joe's good way of getting under control. He went on to say this about gun manufacturers, cut 25.
Guess what? He's devoted his whole life to try to make sure. And all they want, let me sue these guys who have done this stuff, this carnage on the street. Look at the people here in the greatest mass shooting in American history, the worst mass shooting in Mandalay Bay. A guy has 12 assault weapons with bump stocks, which means you can fire it faster, you pull the trigger faster, and 100 rounds. Why in God's name should anyone be able to own that? It's just wrong. And and I promise you, as president, I am going to get these guys. I want to let them know. I promise you.
It's exactly the way not to win in every state where gun rights are respected. Finally, cut number 26. Joe gets confused about his late son, Beau Biden, who was a good guy and the Attorney General of Delaware. Not what Joe says, cut 26.
My son, my deceased son, was the Attorney General of the United States, and before that, he was a federal prosecutor in one of the largest offices in the country.
He was not the Attorney General of the United States. He's the Attorney General of Delaware. Really, Joe? Go home? Please just go home. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Let not your heart be troubled, even though coronavirus is set to smash the markets pretty badly today. Donald Trump was in Las Vegas last night, gave a speech. Let's hear what he had to say. Oh, I forgot. Sonny Bunch. How can I forget Sonny Bunch? He's the official movie critic of the Hugh Hewitt Show and Rebeller Media's voice of reason across the West. And I forgot him. It must be because there's nothing to see, Sonny.
Well, I thought you might have forgotten me because the president has replaced me as the official critic of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
No, I thought
after his speech last night.
Mike Bloomberg is the official critic of the Hugh Hewitt Show because I don't want any competition. Did you critique the debate, by the way?
No, I didn't. I watched about 30 seconds of it after the fact, and that was more than enough for me. I have totally checked out of the Democratic debate. That said, I did find it very funny that people were once again freaking out about the doctored video. So the Bloomberg campaign released.
I just freaked out about it on air. Yes, I just did. Because I hate fake news.
Yeah, and I was like, well, that's, if this is what we're going to freak out about, I think we're in for a very long election cycle.
I could have told you that. By the way, is rebellermedia.com still using the code word Hugh to give the 15% discount that I don't get?
To the best of my knowledge, if you go to rebellermedia.com and you click on an original story and you hit that paywall and you want to sign up and get access to everything, the code Hugh should get you 15% off.
All right.
Save you $3 or so on the air.
I am flying back to D.C. tomorrow, and I'm supposed to go to a movie on Saturday with my friends who are in need of some enjoyment, a little lighthearted break from the pressures of being at the highest levels of government. What should we see?
Well, Hugh, you're kind of right that there is not that much in the theaters, especially for kind of adults looking for something interesting to watch. I assume you guys don't want to go see Sonic the Hedgehog, the smash, huge hit.
We were thinking about the Will Ferrell and Julia Louis-Dreyfus movie that you talked about last week.
Yeah, that's probably the best bet for the adults in the room.
It's an adult movie. It won't bum them out, will it?
No, though it is definitely. I mean, look, it's a movie about adults and adult relationships, and those are often awkward and weird. So who's to say? I don't know. I don't know for sure if it's playing in DC this weekend or not. It's a movie with kind of a limited release, but it's on VOD. And it's playing in some theaters. Google it and see if it's playing in theaters near you. But if you're looking for a fun time in the theaters, there's a movie called VFW that is out now. Hugh, I'm going to be honest. It's probably not the movie for you. It is probably not the movie for you because it is kind of gory.
Oh,
there's some blood and some splatter and that sort of stuff. But it is very fun. So the premise of the movie is basically John Carpenter's Assault on Precinct 13, but starring the best old guy action actors that you can remember. So among others, it's got Stephen Lang, who people will remember from Public Enemies and Avatar. He's kind of the gruff, grizzled. I don't know, Marine drill instructor type guy in Avatar.
Oh, sure.
He is in charge of this VFW bar, and a group of zombie punks try to take it over.
Where do the zombies come from?
Well, they come from drugs, Hugh. The problem is there's an opioid epidemic, and the drug turns people into crazed maniacs.
Oh, it's sort of like coronavirus meets World War Z?
Something like that.
All right.
So anyway, Stephen Lang has to defend his bar. He's got the help of Fred the Hammer Williamson and
excellent
Martin Kove, who people will remember as the bad sensei from the first Karate Kid movie.
Could they get Jimmy Brown out of retirement to help with the Dirty Dozen?
No Jimmy Brown. But it's got William Sadler and returning to a stool near you, George Wendt. Plays.
Is that from Walking Tall? Is that the guy from Walking?
No, George Wendt from Cheers.
Oh, yes. Oh, Norm.
From Cheers. Come on, Norm.
Well, I'd still like the guy from Walking Tall with the big stick. He would be good to have in this movie.
He would be good.
With Jimmy Brown. They could defend the back.
Yeah. It's a fun movie. It's kind of silly. I had a great time in the theater watching it.
Here's the deal. My buddy and I would love that. His wife is going with us.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, my wife went with me, and I did not expect her to love it. And she laughed a lot. It's definitely a funny movie.
Was it your Valentine's Day movie?
More or less.
Okay, so between the Will Ferrell, Julie Louis-Dreyfus, and VFW, which one should we go to?
If VFW is playing in theaters, well, I mean, I would say probably the Julie Louis-Dreyfus Will Ferrell movie is probably the one that's going to have the greatest cross-gender appeal. But like I said, I do like VFW quite a lot. I mean, look, the other big movie in theaters this weekend is Call of the Wild.
Oh, well, that is actually a good movie, isn't it?
Nah, let's not get crazy here. I don't know about good, Hugh. Is
it beautiful?
No, not
what?
exactly.
How can it not be beautiful?
Let me just explain my problem with this movie. So look, it is beautiful in the sense that it takes place in the great open, spaces of the Yukon North, blah blah blah. It is shot by Janusz Kaminski, who is one of the great cinematographers of our time.
You don't like dogs, do you?
There are things about it that look great. I love dogs, Hugh, but I am not a big fan of fake dogs. And this movie has a fake dog. I mean, it's the only way to describe the dog that is with our hero, Mr. Thornton, who he comes across on a freighter, who's going to be who he's traveling to the Yukon North to run from his past, whatever. He comes across this dog, and they have many adventures together. I mean, it's a classic story. We've all read the book in high school. The story itself is not going to be anything, I don't know, shocking or even really that interesting. The problem with this movie is that it has a fake dog, and there's no way around it. It's a fake dog. The dog is CGI. The dog is CGI, and it's got big CGI fake eyes that are emotive and expressive.
That's kind of creepy.
Totally disconcerting and creepy. And I look.
It's like Joe Biden at the debate.
The screenwriter of this movie has defended the choice to use the CGI dog by saying, look, the things that we would have to ask a real dog to do would border on, animal
abuse.
cruelty. It would border on abuse of an animal, and we didn't want to do that, so we got a CGI dog to do this. And there was a making of video that was circulating that was funny and also again kind of weird and creepy, of a man on two arms and two legs, kind of crawling around like a baby, but not like a baby, like a dog. And he had a letter in his mouth, and it showed how they drew the thing so he would look like the dog. It was just cute. It's creepy.
Would you notice if you didn't know that the dog was not a dog? Would you notice that it wasn't a dog?
Oh yeah. Is it
a Stranger Things dog? Is it one of those things?
Like a Demogorgon?
Yeah, like a Demogorgon, or like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You always knew when one of them had been gotten, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Pod people.
It hits that weird part in the uncanny valley where you know that it's not real, so it kind of
it's a pod dog.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's a pod dog.
All right, so we're not going to see that. Maybe I will see that anyway because I like Alaska. Where'd they film this, by the way? Vancouver?
I think they filmed it in the north. I honestly am not 100% sure.
Have you been watching Victoria on Masterpiece Theater?
I've not.
Okay, just a random question, because you usually come up with some television filler if there's nothing good to see, and thus far you've told me there's nothing good to see. Well, VFW, I guess you gave me.
Yeah, VFW I like. Downhill, which is the Julia Louis-Dreyfus movie, and the Will Ferrell movie, I like that. It's a weird. It's funny because there is actually kind of a lot of stuff in theaters There's just nothing that good.
Do you know that in Southern California, increasingly the Asian market is taking over? There are a number of screens giving over to foreign language films, which is fine because there's a large Asian community here in Southern California. That does not replicate inside the Beltway, though. Beltway has got really one of the worst theater ecosystems going, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, DC has always been kind of a weird space because you have a couple of indie theaters, the E Street cinemas and the whatever, but it is very captive to kind of whatever the big movies out in any given week.
Is there anything good at E Street? Because E Street's normally where you can find something off the wall that's worth seeing.
Hugh, I don't know. I don't live in DC anymore.
Oh, that's right. You're exiled.
I live in. Yeah, I go to the Alamo Draft House here in the
That's
Dallas
right,
area.
the Alamo. If we send Dwayne to set you up for a podcast, he has to go to San Antonio, doesn't he? Or Dallas?
No, he's got to go to Dallas.
Well, why do they have an Alamo named Draft House in Dallas?
Well, so the Alamo Draft House started in Austin.
That's cultural appropriation.
It's the last stand to watch.
No, that's cultural appropriation. Sonny Bunch, I'm not sure you're getting any airline miles this week because you haven't helped me out at all.
But I gave you so many choices here.
No, I don't think so.
And I did not give you a failure to warn. There was a warning.
Is there any really bad movie that you haven't told me about?
You don't want to go see Brahms the Boy, too. I can trust you. I can assure you of that. That's a horror movie. You're not going to like it.
All right, you're done. Sonny Bunch of Rebeller Media, rebellermedia.com. Use my name, Hugh, and get the 15% off that I did not get at rebellermedia.com. Time to tell you about Honor Bound Coffee. There it is if you're watching on Town Hall TV, Honor Bound Coffee. If you buy one, you get one free. You never have to drink another cup of coffee again that isn't great coffee. 4 different brews, 4 different grinds, one great cause. The military families of America. Honor Bound Coffee gives 100% of its profits, 100%. It is an Elon Mercenary operation run for the benefit of American military families, beginning with the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund, but they'll spread out. Very carefully selecting the groups. They have to do very well on the 5-star charity navigator ratings and all that stuff. Honor Bound Coffee is the real deal, run by Seth and Pete Talbot, the people who bring you ReliefFactor.com. I cannot, please never drink another cup of coffee that isn't HonorBoundCoffee.com. And please don't forget, ReliefFactor.com. I'm getting it out right now. There it is. And I am getting I got to go see the CGI dog, I think. Lukewarm coffee, yep, check. 4 pills, check. It's actually Stone Cold Coffee. ReliefFactor.com, check. I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. I am ready for today's overhead bin struggle. That's right, the overhead bin awaits me. I hate the overhead bin. I hate it especially since I got a torn rotator cuff, but I'll use my left arm. I'll be sneaky. And I will avoid tearing the left arm one. ReliefFactor.com will help me get through the flight, though. I encourage you to try it every single day. Tarzana Joe is next. Go nowhere, America, except to RebellerMedia.com, ReliefFactor.com, and HonorBoundCoffee.com. Stay tuned. Joined now by Tarzana Joe, the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hello, Joe.
You know, 25 years ago, I moved from New York. That was just before Michael Bloomberg became mayor. Was the best decision of my life, I have to say. All right, here we go. I give you Michael Bloomberg, mayor, billionaire, and charmer. And if you don't believe me, I suggest you ask a farmer. He speaks in cogent sentences. He doesn't halt or stutter, but if he gets elected, better hide your salt and butter. Mike will always let you know exactly what he thinks. The guy is tough on crime, but even tougher on soft drinks. Politicians often say they're sorry for their messes, but they're making him apologize for all of his successes. Read his wit and wisdom, and you're in for quite a treat. If I said things that Mike said, I'd be sleeping on the street. After this performance, could be time for introspection. Everybody's saying that the guy can't take direction. Being prepped and ready for the bombshells would be nice, but there's not much preparation for a nuclear device. I think the way they weighed in left old Mini Mike astounded. They put him on the end, but the guy was sure surrounded. I have to hand it to him for maintaining his composure. I could write a longer poem, but I signed a non-disclosure. That's Mini Mike by Tarzana Joe.
You must have tossed that off after the debate very quickly on Wednesday night, Tarzana Joe.
Well, half and half. You know, we got to get the prep lines in first, and then,
I see.
The zinger at the end. Yeah,
it's sort of a prefabricated poem.
There you go.
All right, are those available for a cheaper rate at TarzanaJoe.com?
No.
All Tarzana Joe poetry.
Only for special friends of Hugh Hewitt.
Uniformly priced. If you need a poem for St. Patrick's Day, now's the time. TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. That is your email, is it not, Joe?
Yes, may the road rise up to greet you.
TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Blarney from McCarney. How's that? No, that's not very good. No, but bet TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. You know what is very good? Created Equal. Clarence Thomas in his own words. Brand new movie out. I should have asked Sonny if he's seen this. I forgot. JusticeThomasMovie.com is where you go to find out if it's playing in a theater near you. If it is, you ought to go and see it. Our friend Michael Beckman saw it this week, loved it. He's fair judge of movies. He loved it. It's Thomas talking about his uniquely American journey. One that began, and I don't know how to describe the poverty in which Clarence Thomas began his life. It's not anything you and I experienced. It was in the segregated South, of course. The title of his memoir is My Grandfather's Son, because he was raised by his very strict grandfather. He made a leftward turn at Holy Cross. He recovered at Yale Law School thanks to the ministrations of one guy named John Bolton, if you didn't know that. Then, of course, came the fiery confirmation hearing that he survived in his decades thriving on the Supreme Court. Go and see it. Get showtimes and tickets at justicethomasmovie.com. Now, as I promised you, Donald Trump will play a lot next hour. Gave a speech in Vegas last night. Cut number 6.
But I also took the strongest ever action to confront China's massive theft of American jobs, and our strategy worked. Last month, we signed a groundbreaking trade agreement with China that will defend our workers, protect our intellectual property, and boost American exports. China will invest $250 billion a year into the United States and buy our products and create jobs. Nothing like that has ever happened before. After years of building up other countries, we are finally rebuilding our country. That's the way we want it.
Meanwhile, he went to Colorado Springs and he gave, this was cut 22, he gave a line that is a peek ahead to something you're going to hear a lot because it resonates with ordinary Americans. Cut 22.
In communities across the nation, radical, and we're watching them very closely, left-wing politicians are imposing deadly sanctuary cities and sanctuary states and policies that compel local law enforcement to release these illegal aliens straight into your beautiful communities. Last year, Colorado Democrats enacted a law declaring this entire state to be a sanctuary for dangerous criminal aliens. As a result of state and local sanctuary policies, officials in Boulder defied federal law enforcement and released a previously deported child molester into the community. In Denver, officials released a criminal alien arrested on felony drug charges, and now he is a very dangerous man. We just caught him for attempted murder. And right here in Colorado Springs, El Paso County, officials defied the request of federal law enforcement and released a criminal alien arrested for robbery, assault, and kidnapping. They released him straight into your community. These are the Democrats. These are your Democrats.
That is, by the way, that is going to work in every rally. Nobody likes sanctuary cities. Nobody thinks they make sense except the radical fringe of the Democratic Party. And Trump's never going to let it go. Come back, hour number 2. You've got to know about coronavirus. It's a bad deal for the markets today. Stay tuned. Yesterday, if you were watching the markets were totally calm. Yesterday, if you were watching the markets were totally calm. Totally calm. Yesterday, if you were watching the markets totally calm. Glory America, bonjour, hi Canada, greetings to my 400 affiliates spread around the globe. This is the Friday it gets serious, I'm afraid. Coronavirus. I'm afraid it's breaking into markets and that we're going to have another rough day. Another rough day after a rough day yesterday. Market reports are always brought to you by Andrew and Todd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, very good friends of mine. The only people doing box office business right now are people who buy in a house. The 10-year Treasury is down to 1.52%. That's so low. By the end of the day, it might cross into 1.4% territory. That's not the interest rate you get on your house, but, man, it means people are going to be buying houses this weekend. AndrewandTodd.com are the place to do that, 888-888-1172. Yesterday, if you were watching the markets were totally calm. Totally calm. And then all of a sudden they fell dramatically. Then they recovered. They ended up being off 128 points yesterday on Thursday. They were down 66 points on Thursday. They were off 12 points on Thursday. Overnight, the Hong Kong index dropped another 1%. And I got up to read bad story after bad story after bad story. It's like the world is finally waking up to what I first told you about early in January. I always keep my eye on the virus because I've read The Great Influenza by John Barry. I know about the 1968 flu. I know about pandemics. And I know that they're considered inevitable, and one will come. And what turned out not to be the bird flu, SARS was a little bit scary, but they contained it. MERS was scarier. They contained it. Ebola was the scariest. They contained it. They have not contained coronavirus. And markets are beginning to notice 76,790 cases. 2,249 people died. And the world is finding themselves with new cases everywhere. Hubei, which is the home of Wuhan, Hubei province, revised their daily numbers up. 631 cases following deaths in a jail. That followed downward reports in Happy Talk. And I warned you earlier this week, do not believe in Happy Talk. Happy Talk will kill you. Then South Korea got its own outbreak. They canceled the Davos of Asia. The Boao Forum is held annually. Big deal. Regional business and political elites come to the island of Hainan. Not this year, March 24th to 27th. It's canceled. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. It really is just the tip of the iceberg. The manufacturing supply chain is pummeled from all sides, according to the South China Morning Post. All across China, the goods you expect routinely to show up in Walmart in the United States are not being made. That has ripple effects throughout the economy. And people worry now about how long does it last on surfaces. The 1918 virus lasted many days. We don't know. People wonder, how long are you contagious? We don't know. Michael Gerson has a great Washington Post column on this. And it's reassuring that the death rate is only 2%. Now, the flu is 0.07%. But SARS was 10%. But we don't know if that's the real death rate. We do know, as The Guardian reports this morning, in this my morning rundown, coronavirus air travel demand will fall for the first time in 11 years. Mark Sweeney's story. The spread of the coronavirus will result in the first fall in global air travel in more than a decade. The International Air Transportation warned that falling passenger demand as a result of the outbreak of COVID-19 would cost the airline industry £29 billion. From the Telegraph, Ambrose Evans pictured dominoes falling in global shipping as coronavirus continues to grip China's economy. Container shipping from China ports has collapsed since the outbreak of coronavirus, has yet to show any sign of recovery. Almost half of the planned sailings on the route from Asia to North Europe have been canceled over the last 4 weeks. Half! Refrigerated food, ships full of frozen food known as reefers are unable to enter Chinese ports. The backups are terrible. Ben from the Financial Times. Coronavirus wreaks havoc on luxury and fashion groups. The coronavirus has kept as many as 1,000 Chinese fashion buyers from Europe's top fashion shows this month, as the luxury industry faces its biggest threat since the 2008 financial crisis. All right, then you get this. Coronavirus infected Americans flown home against the CDC's advice. This is one of those stories. It's by Lena's son, Lenny Bernstein, Shabani Matani, and Joe Achenbach in the Washington Post. In the wee hours of a rainy Monday, more than a dozen buses sat on a tarmac at Tokyo's airport. Inside, 328 weary Americans wearing surgical masks and gloves waited anxiously to fly home. But as the buses idled, U.S. officials wrestled with troubling news. New test results showed that 14 passengers were infected with the virus. The U.S. State Department had promised that no one with the infection would be allowed to board the plane. The decision had to be made: let them all fly or leave them behind in Japanese hospitals. Before I turn the page, how hard of a decision is that? Do not let them fly. In Washington, where it was still a Sunday afternoon, a fierce debate broke out. The State Department, a top Trump administration health official, wanted to forge ahead. The infected passenger had no symptoms, could be segregated on the plane in a plastic-lined enclosure. But officials at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention disagreed. The CDC believed the 14 should not be flown back. It was like the worst nightmare, said a senior official involved in the decision. The State Department won the argument, but unhappy CDC officials demanded to be left out of the news release that explained that infected people were being flown to the United States. The tarmac decision was a pivotal moment for U.S. officials improvising their response to a crisis with few precedents. Now, I don't know how much of this to believe. I often say I believe that the people told the Post this, because the Post is very good and accurate in reporting what they are told. But we do not know motive. It could be 180 degrees backwards. It could be that the CDC pushed to bring them home and the State Department said don't, and then the CDC covered their butts. That happens all the time. What I do know, we need to know the exact facts of that call, and we need a defined protocol ASAP. President and his entourage leave for India on Sunday. They need to leave behind instructions on what to do. Because believe you me, there are people who hate Trump so much they will screw this up just to make him look bad. May I bring to your attention the non-story that President Trump was upset with the former acting DNI, Joe McGuire, has been replaced by Rick Grinnell, because Joe McGuire let a staffer go to the Hill and deliver a briefing on Russian interference in the 2020 election before he gave it to the president. Guess what? That is entirely appropriate. The DNI and everyone who works for the DNI reports to the president and answers to Congress. The president controls them. He gets input into that briefing. He gets to know before they tell the Congress what they're going to tell the Congress. Now, it's not often that the president actually cares what members of the executive branch, Article 2, are saying to Article 1. But you know he cares about this subject, and they didn't tell him. So did McGuire get chewed out? Yes. Was that appropriate? Yes. When we come back, we turn to Donald Trump. But that is this morning's rundown. It's bad with the coronavirus. It's getting worse. I think this is the weekend and the week ahead where we come to grips with the fact of what it's done to the world economy and what it will do in the weeks and months ahead. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt playing the theme song from Victoria, the wonderful masterpiece theater series in its third season. I do that just so that it give you something, giving you a wonderful opportunity to watch, excellent television this weekend. You don't have to, you don't have to watch a terrible television show. You can watch some great history, some terrific, riveting television. Watch Victoria. You might also go out and see Clarence Thomas, the movie, justicethomasmovie.com if you want to find times and tickets and show times near you. So you can watch Victoria at home and you can go out and see Clarence Thomas. You don't have to waste your time. We're in the sports death time, right? I know some of you like college hoops, but you can't get me to watch college hoops, and I don't care about the NBA. So you're in the dead zone. And you look at the theaters, and there's just not a whole lot out there. Clarence Thomas, in his own words, Created Equals the name of the movie. Go and find it. Go out and see that. Or you can do what I do. Fly. I'll be flying this week. I'm going to read the new C.J. Box thriller. I think we're going to have him on next week. I understand, Generalissimo, you're a part of this guy.
You and I are featured prominently in this
All right,
book.
so I'm going to be reading that on the return trip from D.C. and then talking to CJ next week.
We may not actually speak to each other after you have read this book.
Can't wait till that. Tom Holland is a British historian. He's got a new book out called Dominion, which I've been listening to, which is great. But what I really am going to do all weekend, and I want you to sit down now, is I'm going to obsess about coronavirus. That's not going to surprise Dwayne. But I'm just honest with you. I've been honest with you for 20 years. I'm spooked. A guy sold all my Amazon. Went all into cash. Why? Because I'm just not smart enough. I don't know how to deal with this. I'm pretty smart to pick one stock at a time. I've done that well over my life. I've bought mutual funds and government bonds and then pick one stock like Apple or Amazon. It's always done well for me. Be diversified and then buy what you know. But here's what I don't know. I don't know if we're up against another 2008 here. And I'm the first person you probably heard talking about this on January 22nd, and it's because I have read history. I read history. Pandemics are part of human history. And we have never had this interconnected a world, this helplessly self-reliant, that's the wrong word. It's just interconnected. This world has got dominoes. It's like those long domino strings that you see. You push one and it all goes down. That's what's happening with coronavirus. And I don't know if the black swan's coming today or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, but eventually the markets are going to wake up, and they've been shrugging it off. New York Times, 2 days ago, Neil Irwin. Why the stock market isn't too worried about coronavirus. It begins on Monday evening. Apple warned its shareholders about the effects of the new coronavirus outbreak. Revenue, Apple said, will take a big hit. But Wall Street, in the end, mostly ignored it. The S&P fell a mere 0.3% Tuesday. It fit a pattern. The stock market has barely reacted despite the idling of countless factories in China as workers are quarantined. Even shares of American companies with the most direct exposure to the Chinese economy are holding up fine. The buoyant mood in the stock market has continued even as economic forecasters have downgraded their global growth in 2020. So, why? Let me tell you why. Ignorance. They don't understand what viruses do. They mutate. The 1918 pandemic went through a dozen plus, quote, passages. That means evolutions. That means mutations. That means it got deadlier and deadlier before it got less deadly and milder, and then part of the background noise. But when it raged in September, October, and November of 2018, it was shutdown time. And if that happens, the market's going to get crushed. It is, however, a great time to buy a house. AndrewandTodd.com. AndrewandTodd.com. Coming right back. Donald Trump was talking yesterday. I want you to hear what his rallies are going to sound like between now and November. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. Donald Trump in Colorado Springs last night. This is just full frontal Donald Trump. This is the rally you'll hear 100 times. I can play it 100 times. Cut number 17, talking about the goal number one of the president is to keep America safe, and that means a strong military. 17.
When it comes to our military and our safety and our security, we don't worry about budgets, right? We don't worry about budgets. We had to rebuild it. It was depleted. It was in bad shape. It was old. It was tired. We have the best people in the world, but that old equipment, now we have brand new jets. We have brand new missiles and rockets. We have everything. All made in the USA. In my State of the Union address, I proudly declared that we are in the midst of the great American comeback. That's what we're doing. Our country is stronger today than ever before.
Now, he had fun as well. He made fun of the Oscars. He made fun of Parasite, which won Best Picture. He made fun of Brad Pitt. Cut number 18.
By the way, how bad were the Academy Awards this year? Did you see it? And the winner is a movie from South Korea. What the hell was that all about? We got enough problems with South Korea with trade. On top of it, they give him the best movie of the year. Was it good? I don't know. You know, I'm looking for like, where let's get Gone with the Wind. Can we get like Gone with the Wind back, please? Sunset Boulevard. So many great movies. The winner is from South Korea. I thought it was best foreign film, right? Best foreign movie. No, it was did this ever happen before? And then you have Brad Pitt. I was never a big fan of his. He got up and said a little wise guy statement. Little wise guy. He's a little wise guy. Anyway, but we're doing well. But here, I just showed this real quick, right? So this horrible journalist, she's a real, she's a Trump hater. She gets, she's worth 0 ratings. Nobody watches her. But she said, she was trying to look, Bloomberg made a fool out of himself last night. He choked. He's another one who's going,
But he just improvises. By the way, I saw Parasite. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt walked out of it. It is inconceivable to me that it beat Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's like Shakespeare in Love beating Saving Private Ryan. Hollywood gets a trend. They decide for PC reasons we're going to go with the subtitled movie that not many of them have seen. It's interesting. It's very violent. It is not that interesting. It is not that relevant to America in the least, because part of it is premised on having safe rooms for when the North Koreans come over the border. It's not about income inequality. It's about Korea. And it just was mind-boggling to me that it won. So Donald Trump talks that way, and the left gets upset, and the elite media get upset that he's trashing a movie. But most of America think, Parasite? Really? And it's a movie that people leave. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt doesn't leave very much, but it just got too violent. So he makes a little bit of the fun of the media next. Cut number 19.
You see, they never do it, including Fox, by the way. Fox is not that much better. We just got lucky because we have all their high-rated shows are the shows that like Trump. All their loser shows like Cavuto are the shows that don't like Trump. How is Shep Smith doing lately, by the way? How's Shep Smith? He had the lowest ratings, and now Cavuto took his place, so that's okay. But they never show the room. My wife, our great first lady, she goes, I say, hi, honey, did you watch the debate? Yeah. How did the room look? Was that, because last night, I think we turned away 21,000 people. We had an arena that it held like 12, but we fill up the basketball courts, right? Or the ice rink. We had to have 15, 16,000 people. It was like on fire. You all saw it. It was great. And she said to me, darling, how did you do? I said, I did great. I said, did you see the arena? She said, no, they never show the arena. You know?
They actually don't. You don't get to see many Trump rallies. You get to watch debates, endless conversations that are not serious subjects with not adversarial but difficult journalist topics. Like global warming would be an actual good conversation. You don't need a global warming skeptic. You need someone who knows economics to talk to people about the Green New Deal, and someone who will listen to Bernie and give him enough time to hang himself because it doesn't make a lick of sense, but they never do it. Well, anyway, Donald Trump talking about what the left does and what he does. Cut number 20, Donald Trump.
While the extreme left has been wasting America's time with vile hoaxes, we've been killing terrorists, creating jobs, raising wages, enacting fair trade deals, securing our border, and lifting up citizens of every race, color, religion, and creed, right? We added another 225,000 brand new beautiful jobs last month. Way, way, way above what our great geniuses back there thought it would be. 225,000. Think of it. We right now have more people working in our country than at any time in the history of our country.
You know, I was on Al Sharpton's show on last Sunday. I'm doing Meet the Press this Sunday. Last Sunday I did Al's show. And I pointed out that Al asked me, how's the president going to do with the African-American vote? I said, well, you know, lowest black unemployment in history. Al said, that's not true. That's not true. And I looked it up. It's CNBC's number. It is true. Now, maybe in the era when we didn't keep statistics during World War II, it might have been higher. But I mean, as long as I've been alive, we ain't never had this for the entire country. And African-American unemployment is higher than Anglo unemployment. That's true. Point being, everyone's doing better in the Trump economy. Everybody is. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the rundown. You may have noticed, if you are a 3-hour-a-day listener, that I replayed my first segment from the first hour in the second hour today. 2 reasons. One, my voice is a little shot, called RLP, and I'm taking a med to take care of that, so don't worry about me. It's fine. And it'll be back by Monday. But just preserving a little bit. More important, I wanted the second hour to hear what the rundown is. Now, people go to work at different times in the day. People leave at different times in the day. And if you leave at 6 a.m. in the East, or you listen to the podcast from the beginning, you hear the rundown. Now, the rundown is something I came up with. People go to bed. They don't know what happened overnight. I jam all the most important stories. It's just the news you need, the analysis you want in one 10-minute segment. It's called The Rundown. If you go to youtube.com and you search Hugh Hewitt and you subscribe, you'll get The Rundown every morning. It ought to be the first thing you listen to. No smoke, no jokes. No bad analysis, no spin. No vote for Bernie, no vote for Joe, no vote for Mike, no trashing Trump like all the morning shows that are not Fox and Friends. None of that stuff, just the news you must have. The Rundown. And that's available. All of my big interviews are available over at hughhewitt.com. They're all put up at the YouTube channel. But if you want the Rundown, just subscribe at YouTube. A few thousand of you do that already. You want to know the absolute bottom line of what's going on in the world. And right now, I think it's coronavirus. I think it is a very bad situation. I believe the Chinese are lying to us. I believe in Iran. They say they have 13 cases in Iran. Iran lies about everything. They can't even spell Iran right without lying. All right, they deny their Persian history. They are a completely dysfunctional, deceit-driven regime. They tell the truth about nothing. If they tell you they have 13 cases of coronavirus in Iran, they haven't told us how they got there. They're not telling us how they're treating them. And believe me, it's more than 13. South Korea is a relatively open society, and they can't keep up with the numbers. There are these things called super spreaders. We learned this during SARS. Some people have the amazing ability to project out their droplets. That's how viruses spread. You know, someone sneezes on you, it's in the air. You go into a bathroom, you touch a surface, you don't wash your hands, you touch your mouth and your eyes, you've got it. Droplets. Now, it's not like HIV where you needed bodily fluids to be exchanged. No, it's like the common cold. It's like the flu. You get it from droplets. We don't know how long it lasts on surface. We don't know anything about coronavirus yet, other than the expected mortality is 2% right now. But I know one thing. Iran is lying about it. I know another thing. China is lying about it. So I know you should be worried about it. That's why I did the rundown twice today. That's why you should subscribe to the rundown at YouTube. Go to youtube.com, type in Hugh Hewitt, up will cut my channel, hit subscribe. You'll get it every day. You'll know the most important story of the day. I read it all. I read the Financial Times, the Guardian, the Telegraph, the Times of London, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and the Morning Post, South China Morning Post. English-speaking newspaper of Hong Kong. It's CRP controlled. I mean CCP controlled, but it's still the best thing in Asia. Now let me tell you about Honor Bound coffee. About a month ago, I started drinking this. Started telling you about it. If you go to honorboundcoffee.com, you're going to see 4 different blends and 4 different grinds. You're going to see an introductory offer. 2 bags of Honor Bound coffee for the price of 1. You should know it is produced by the same wonderful father-son team, Pete and Seth Talbot, that do ReliefFactor.com. And they came to me and said, would you help? I said, absolutely. What military charity would you recommend? I said, right out of the box, Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund. People who've been listening to my show for years know that I totally trust these people. They have the greatest board in the world, all the commandants, all the commandant wives, generals, army. They take care of all service members. They do it for really low cost. You hear the wounded warriors who come on this show on Veterans Day, Memorial Day. They talk about their wounds and how their recoveries are progressing. They're all supported by Semper Fi Fund for life. They need a wheelchair in 10 years, they're going to get one. Their adapted truck runs out of chassis, they're going to get a new one. Whatever they need, they get because of the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund. So Pete and Seth Talbot said, okay, they'll be our first beneficiary of Honor Bound coffee. 100% of the profits of Honor Bound coffee. 100%. What is there left to decide? You buy coffee every day. You drink coffee every day. It is great coffee. Not Maxwell's, not Folger. Don't go to the market ever again for coffee. Go to honorboundcoffee.com and subscribe. Serve those who serve you. Now also, ReliefFactor.com. I already took my ReliefFactor.com. I'm getting on the airplane after the show, flying east. Got to go do Meet the Press, spend a few days inside the Beltway. Hear about their silly talk. Their panic on the Democratic side because Bernie's going to be the nominee. They know he's going to be the nominee. I'm going to be on the day after the Nevada caucuses, and Bernie's going to win those. Going to be much hand-wringing on the Meet the Press set, I'm sure. But I'll feel fine because of ReliefFactor.com. I will be ready because of ReliefFactor.com. My Carrion Kirkman, Resveratrol, Omega. ReliefFactor.com is what keeps you in the game, keeps you in the field, keeps you moving forward every single day. Do not leave home without it. Do not begin your commute without it. Go and get it right now. $19.95 gets you started. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. What did Ed Rendell say about Michael Bloomberg? Stick around and I'll tell you on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Oh, my goodness. It's Hugh Hewitt. The weather in Alexandria, Virginia, 25 degrees. Inside the Beltway, 22 degrees. Inside the city. Oh, my goodness. I hate leaving California in February. The only good thing about going home is my pillow towels are on the East Coast. They're not on the West Coast. If you haven't got the My Pillow towels yet, I know a lot of people like to buy his Giza Dream bed sheets, etc. from Mike Lindell. I say go to mypillow.com and get the towels. I know you can buy one, get one free with the 10-year warranty on the Dream Sheets, the Giza Dream Sheets. You can call 800-951-5493. I say get the towels. I am a contrarian. They're the best towels ever. Ever, ever, ever. And they're on the East Coast. That's it. But 25 degrees in D.C., in Northern Virginia, 25 degrees? Ay, 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 ay. I may go see Created Equal and just stay in the theater. The JusticeThomasMovie.com. I know you're going to go see that. It's got to be showing in D.C. I haven't looked yet. JusticeThomasMovie.com. JusticeThomasMovie.com. He's so inspiring. I've known him since 1984. The Justice has spoken at Chapman Law School a number of times. He and I served on the combined federal campaign. He was chairman of the Beltway region, and I was the national chairman from OPM. We served on a committee together. I didn't know him. I just thought to myself then, what a charismatic, smart guy. And then a few chats here and there. I don't know him well. I just know that his laugh makes people laugh. He's the happiest man in the building. He rumbles. One of those people that he says he rumbles. And Michael Pack, who made the movie about him, is a skilled filmmaker. I cannot wait to see this. Created Equal, Clarence Thomas, in his own words, go and see the movie. I promised you before the break, Ed Rendell on Bloomberg TV yesterday, talking about Bernie Sanders. This is why a lot of you are voting for Bernie Sanders. It's not why I voted for him, but a lot of you are voting for him in South Carolina, in California, in Virginia, wherever the open primary. A lot of you are voting because of what Ed Rendell said on Bloomberg TV yesterday, cut number 13.
California, but bring it back to Pennsylvania for a moment, a state that you know terribly well. Could Bernie Sanders win Pennsylvania?
If the election were held today, no. He's against fracking, and fracking is viewed in Pennsylvania as an economic boom for the state. Natural gas is, I think, a very good bridge to the day when we can produce our electricity by renewables. That day is a long way off. In Pennsylvania, renewables only account for 7% of our electricity.
So Ed Rendell doesn't think Bernie can win. Don't vote for the weakest candidate. A lot of Democrats crossed over and voted for Donald Trump, not realizing that he'd become the disruptor and the better candidate, the only one who could take on Hillary. I'm voting for Bernie because it's the clear choice. Let's put socialism on the ballot. Let's compare socialism to free market economics. Let's see his judges versus Trump's judges. Let's see his military budget versus Trump's military budget. Let's compare his regulatory state versus Trump's regulatory state. Trump will win. Don't vote for him because he's weak, because you don't know who can mobilize. I think Bernie's pretty strong. Robert Costa, by the way, was on MSNBC with Nicole Wallace. Our friend Costa summed up. I had him on before the debate. I wondered what he thought after the debate. Here's what he told Nicole Wallace, cut number 15.
For many moderates in the party, last night was a disaster because they were hoping either Mayor Bloomberg would take control of the race, or Mayor Buttigieg, or Senator Klobuchar, or Vice President Biden would take control of the message in that wing of the party. Instead, it remains scattered. It remains balkanized in the centrist wing of the Democratic Party. And Senator Sanders, when you look at national polling, continues to surge ahead. And ahead of Super Tuesday.
This is why they don't invite me on Nicole's show. There is no centrist wing of the Democratic Party. There is left, far left, and over the edge left. There is no centrist wing. But they don't want me to say that, so they don't put me on Nicole's show. Tom Steyer, on with CNN's Allison Camerata yesterday. He declared the winner of the debate, cut number 1.
Well, I saw the person who won the debate last night, whose name is Donald Trump. That's the first thing I'd say.
And what do you mean by that? How did President Trump win?
Because I saw so much bickering between Democratic candidates, tearing each other down and going after each other, and forgetting the fact that what really counts is beating Donald Trump in November of 2020.
What about
I saw people going after each other's personality.
You're a has-been too. I mean, people are throwing away their votes on anybody except Bernie or Bloomberg or Buttigieg. John Kerry is out there stumping for Joe Biden. It's like, what was that movie that Walter Matthau was in? The old guy movie?
Oh, Grumpy Old Men.
Grumpy Old Men. John Kerry and Joe Biden are doing Grumpy Old Men. He walks into a room. There are literally a dozen people there. Cut number 16.
I don't get it, but I know that each and every one of you here has the ability to be able to help restore a sense of this country not being beholden.
Do you hear the cell phones going off? People's hearing aids going off? It's like the ancient of ancient crowds. Poor Joe Biden. Just go home. Tom Steyer, go home. This is a Bloomberg, Buttigieg, Bernie race, and Bernie's going to win it. Coming up after the break, America, we continue our conversation with Dr. Larry Arnn and the University of Oklahoma professor who's written Land of Hope, brand new book on everything you need to know about American history. Do not miss a minute of it. Meanwhile, go over to YouTube, sign up for my rundown. Every day, all you have to do is put Hugh Hewitt in the search engine. It will come up. Subscribe. You'll get the news you need, the analysis you want every single day in 10 minutes. Come right back. Hour number 3 straight ahead. Hi, Canada. Greetings to every one of my 400 affiliates listening. This is the second of a three-part Hillsdale dialogue on the brand new book by Dr. Wilfred McClay, introduced in the first part of our series. He is, of course, a professor now at Hillsdale College. He's the Distinguished Teaching Fellow at Hillsdale College. He's also the G.T. and Libby Blankenship Professor of History of Liberty at the University of Oklahoma. He has served for 11 years as a member of the National Council on Humanities. His books include The Masterless, Self and Society in a Modern America, The Student's Guide to U.S. History, and the brand new Land of Hope, An Invitation to the Great American Story, which has become a 25-part video series at Hillsdale College. Excellent video course offerings, all of which are available at hillsdale.edu. Dr. McClay is joined this hour by Dr. Larry Arnn, of course, president of Hillsdale College, and by Kyle Mernen, who comes out from behind the curtain. He's the director of online learning and for years has been our go-between with the often irascible and difficult to find Dr. Arnn. Kyle has been long-suffering and long-serving up in the wilds of Michigan, and we are glad to have him here. Gentlemen, we left off last week when, last hour, when we were talking about the new nation, when Americans actually began to understand themselves as Americans. Can we go back there, Dr. Wilfred McClay? I'm sure it appears in Lecture 4. When does that American identity get forged? Because there isn't a lot to do between the Puritans and the Virginians for a couple of decades at least.
Well, one of the things that happens is the Great Awakening. In the early part of the 18th century, there is a religious revival that sweeps up and down the coast, in the coastal British colonies and in inland, in frontier areas. And this is a profound. It's an evangelical religious revival, spearheaded by people like the British George Whitefield, to some extent Jonathan Edwards, great Puritan sort of neo-Calvinist theologian, was also a very fine preacher. Everybody knows "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God," but he had a wider repertoire than that. And these were people who excited a sense of the sort of restoration of the fervency of the religious convictions that certainly the Puritans and others had brought with them. And this, because it was an American experience, it was something that happened. It happened in Georgia. It happened in Philadelphia. It happened in New England. It reinforced in a very indirect way, but a very palpable way, the sense that all of us were Americans, that we had in common this experience. We all had heard George Whitefield preach. We all had been under the sway of the same set of ideas and the same sense of the perhaps falling away from our original calling. So I think that religious revival was very important in planting an idea of Americanness.
Dr. Arnn, it took 150 years to form a revolutionary moment in 1776. The late, great Judith Sklar made us read when I was an undergraduate long ago, as did Harvey Mansfield, those pamphlets, the committees of correspondence, and you averred to them earlier. How important were these pamphlets it wasn't an illiterate society, but it is not one in which literacy is universal.
Well, although it was very common. I'm sorry, were you directing it to Dr. Arnn?
Go ahead, Wolf.
Literacy was very wide and common. So, the pamphleteers had wide influence. Of course, we all know about Tom Paine and his influence with Common Sense and so on. But yes, these earlier individuals and the committees of correspondence were a slow, tentative way that these independent colonies began to think of themselves as operating in terms of a common cause.
Dr. Arnn?
Yeah, well, so just remember how radical this is. I stated Churchill's thesis, but there's never been a time, and there can't really be another one, where a civilization picks up and goes somewhere else. And they brought with them all the knowledge that was in that civilization, and they didn't bring the aristocracy or the forms with them. Mm-hmm. They didn't even know what they were going to see, and this claim that America is the last best hope. It's plausible when you think about the dramatic nature of those facts. And that means that they had 150 years to get used to running their own lives. And that bound them ultimately to one another much more than it bound them to England with its traditional forms and its king and its aristocracy. And England, too, is going the way we're going. But even today, they're not just like us, because they have that history and we have ours, and we have lived together and figured out how to cope with that history. And so and when they became a people, that, first of all, what were they? They came over here to escape religious persecution, but to found communities of enforced religious conformity. And it took them a while to figure out that although they didn't know how big the continent was, it wasn't big enough to do that because inside the towns, they'd get to fighting and they'd go somewhere else, right? And they worked out finally that you're going to have to let people worship as they please, which in my understanding and theirs, ultimately theirs, is one of the commandments of Christianity.
Yes.
This experience is unique, and as I say, it can't really be repeated.
Kyle, if I can ask you a question here, just a technical one. When you're filming Dr. McClay's 25-part series, I know you occasionally attempt to drop in images that illustrate. It's harder when you're talking about 1600s, early 1600s, all the way through 1776. It gets easier as you get to Matthew Brady and beyond. How difficult is the technical side of this 25-part series?
It certainly gets easier. We probably have about 1,000 images and video clips in the series as a whole, and we have a lot of great ones from the early American history, and it certainly picks up as you continue in the course. So that's one of the
1,000?
Yes.
Wow. You're not paying him enough, Dr. Arnn.
Yeah, he says that too.
Okay, so I got to ask Dr. McClay, when you saw it, have you watched it yet? I'm not one that likes to watch myself. Have you watched the course?
Oh, I don't either. I after 3 days, and having my wife watch it first, I watched the trailer, and it's incredible. I feel like the actor who just showed up and read his lines, and then the director creates this magic. It's not. I mean, you really are talking this Kyle guy, this mild-mannered guy. He is the Wizard of Oz, except when you look past the curtain, he's much more handsome and debonair.
Oh, no, Dr. Arnn's very upset because we've given him 2 causes to demand a raise. Dr. Arnn, you've been in this business of video courses for a while now. The ambition keeps growing. And I believe it's actually the best of times for serious content. Do you agree with me about that?
Yeah, we're, both alarmed and gratified by the response to a lot of things we do right now. And they all proceed from the principle that if you get privileged to learn some things in a setting where you can really learn, there's an obligation to share. And so we think that if somebody wants to learn with us, we're going to try to find a way to help them do that. And, we're going to expand to lots of different audiences, homeschoolers, we have these charter schools, and we're going to have more. And we want to help their teachers learn, and we want people like Dr. McClay to be teachers to them. And so, America needs a great awakening. And so we want to help fuel it.
I'm thinking of my friend Dr. Ken Williams, who is the chairman of the Orange County Board of Education, often assailed by the left and teachers' unions. I can see boards of education going out and mandating that they use Land of Hope, regardless of what their teacher union-controlled state boards of education say, and then be willing to fight for it, Dr. Arnn. Because you've got to fight against this giant, massive conformity.
Well, kudos to him. They have just approved a Hillsdale College affiliated charter school for Orange County.
Oh,
and
didn't know that.
Yeah, and Jeff Barkey, a Hillsdale College parent, and Mark Bucum, whom you and I have known for 400 years, are movers in that thing, and we are movers in that thing. And you can. There's a way to if human beings remain the same, and in essential respects, our argument is they do, then what they need to know and how they learn remains the same. And so it's actually been known for a long time how to run a school and make it successful. And we do that at, in 24 places now, roughly, and there's going to be more.
And there would be, even every public school board out there listening this morning, go get Land of Hope, go to Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble, or go watch the video course at Hillsdale.edu, and then agendize it and say, I think we ought to go back to teaching history in a way that will form citizens, and Land of Hope will do just that. We come back and we talk about slavery. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest. The Hillsdale Dialogue continues. Originally taped on in February of 2020, also our Thanksgiving show. He's joined by Dr. Wilfred McClay of the University of Oklahoma and also Hillsdale College, and the Director of Online Learning at Hillsdale, Kyle Mernen. All things Hillsdale, including this new 25-part course on American history led by Dr. Wilfred McClay, are available at hillsdale.edu. This is a short segment, 5 minutes, and I'm going to turn to you, Dr. Arnn, because we've spent hours and hours talking about slavery on the Hillsdale Dialogue and on the Cooper Union speech and on all of this. But if I can force you just to do a 4-minute force march through how did the scourge come? How did we get rid of it? When was it recognized?
Well, it came here through the colonial era, that 150 years. And just as a lot of things changed in the opinions of the colonists over that time, the opinions about slavery changed and sharpened. And so, it's just think what a remarkable thing the American Revolution is, because they could have just said, we're English and the king is a predator upon our customs of old. And they didn't say that. They proclaimed that all men are created equal, according to a universal law above any human law, the laws of nature and nature's God. Well, we developed a new view about that, or many of us did develop a new view about that over the subsequent roughly one generation. Let's say from 1787 and the Northwest Ordinance until 1820, the Missouri Compromise. It was necessary then, you couldn't just simply forbid slavery in new territory anymore, but you could in 1787 on the motion of Thomas Jefferson. So that shift, right, was a shift away from an opinion that if a thing can talk, it's a human. And that's the classic understanding of what the human is. If it starts talking, in the end, you're going to have to let it vote. And so that's the story and the crisis in America. And slavery was here and embedded, and, Wilfred's written a book about this, and the book is brilliant on these points. I'll add one more point, that I think that there was an evil in the founding generation. There was a consensus that slavery is a wrong, but there wasn't an understanding, there wasn't a thought, or there was no experience to indicate that these people of different race and color were going to live as equal citizens among everybody else.
Now, my opinion is not solicited nor needed, but I'm going to give it anyway. I think the great villain of American history is John C. Calhoun, because as Dr. Arnn has educated me, I want to know if Dr. McClay agrees. Jefferson and every slaveholder understood at the time of the Revolution that slavery was wrong. Lincoln brought that out in detail in the Cooper Union speech. It was Calhoun who messed up the potential peaceful resolution of the peculiar institution that was deeply immoral and wrong from the beginning. Do you agree with my theories?
Well, I wouldn't target him specifically, exclusively, but he makes a good target. And the interesting thing about Calhoun is that he didn't really start out that way. He started out as a sort of classic Whig politician, a nationalist, very much a nationalist, not a sectionalist. But he, like all politicians, gravitated to the sources of his support. I think, slavery just became an institution that was so enriching to a very small number of people in a very localized part of the country, but this just became too much of a cornucopia, economically speaking, for those individuals. For
Dr. McClay, though, you mentioned...
So they started defending it as a positive good, which you don't see at the time of the founding.
You mentioned the Great Awakening. These are all deeply religious people. I've always thought they felt compelled by the Bible to justify what they thought was... Obviously, they have material interest, but they're religious people with a conscience, and they know that it's wrong. Calhoun gave them the door by which they might understand it as not obviously wrong.
Well, and you had people like James Henley Thornwell and the other, Southern Presbyterian theologians, brilliant men. Eugene Genovese says they were much smarter than the Northern theologians, but who began to draw increasingly on the examples of slavery and the even the New Testament sort of indifference to the institution, seemingly the existence of the institution as a justification for it. So you have Lincoln in the great second inaugural saying, making this point, both sides read the same Bible, both sides worship the same God, and yet there was something I think ultimately disingenuous.
Oh, you bet. You bet. Hillsdale Dialogue continues after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, part 2 of 3 parts on the brand new book by Dr. Wilfred McClay, Land of Hope, the key new American history textbook. A 25-part video series at Hillsdale College as well, hillsdale.edu. We are spending 3 hours on it. We hope that you will go and watch the video course, get the book, spread it far and wide. We come now to Washington, the unique figure in American history. There are 2 great figures in American history, Washington and Lincoln, who are just so unique. The first one is Washington. Dr. McClay, it's hard to imagine anyone else pulling this off. It's such a unique combination of someone who will on a horseback lead from the front into the hail of bullets and at the same time retire to Mount Vernon after 8 years. It's just impossible to imagine.
It's extraordinary. I mean, if you're inclined to see the existence of the United States of America as a miracle, as divinely sanctioned, George Washington is a place to look. How on earth what did we do to deserve him? He's such a surpassingly great man, and of course, as everyone knows, even at the Constitutional Convention, the way that the presidency, this newly empowered presidency, which a lot of people were afraid of, the only way it became conceivable to them was and acceptable to them was the idea that George Washington was going to be that person, and of course he was the great unifier. And when he was gone, when he left office, I mean, already this country was starting to fall apart along partisan lines. But Washington, during his lifetime, had always managed to command the respect of everyone. He is just a noble figure in the deepest sense of the term.
And Dr. Arnn, not just Washington, what Dr. McClay just said, a time of giants. You've got not just Washington, but Madison, who writes his inaugural address, Congress's response, and then ghosts Washington's response to Congress. You've got Hamilton, who goes into what the musical calls the room where it happens with Jefferson, emerges with the great compromise that saves the Union. It's actually an extraordinary collection of talent. I don't know if it has a predicate.
Yeah. If you want to see, the power, well, one place where you can see it, if you read something that Jefferson wrote in 1774, if I remember the date right, a summary view of the rights of British North America. It's a very complex document, and he always regarded it as kind of a failure. But read the last paragraph, because, he was the man who could give voice, right? It goes roughly like this. He says, the last paragraph, he says, "Let those flatter, sire, who fear. It is not an American art."
Ha!
That's sort of football war talk.
It is.
Your ministers are servants, he says, So, he's a talent, right? And then Madison, writing the Constitution, who was often the corrector of of Thomas Jefferson, who, said and did various silly things in his life. And Hamilton, who was he had the qualities of George Washington and some others. He not quite the character, nobody did, but courage. George Washington could be incredibly restrained and incredibly aggressive, and so should Hamilton. And Hamilton was eloquent and tireless, right? So the partnership among those people and John Adams, that produced the American Revolution. And as Wilfred just said, it really didn't last after the death of Washington. They all fell to fighting and founded the party system. And they worked that out, but they had to, in a way, that's a very good, I hadn't thought of it before, but I think Wilfred suggested it. They had to figure out a way to run the country without George Washington. And it wasn't easy.
Yeah, we are working on an exhibit now at the Nixon Library called the President's Club, and on the friendship that evolved at the end of their lives between Adams and Jefferson. But Dr. McClay, they were anything but friends until they were old men exchanging letters.
Yes, and that's such a. I haven't read Gordon Wood's new book on the subject, but that friendship is a sort of inexhaustibly interesting phenomenon, and how over time enemies can become friends, can become, they can draw away from the heat of their particular battles to a love of country and a love of one another that's mediated by love of country. And, it gets back to the theme that we began with back in the previous hour about how to lack, let me put it positively, to have a shared narrative, to have a shared story of what America is. That's the first step to overcoming the divisions between us, and it's an essential step. If we don't agree in some way about the story, about who we are, then we're not going to be able to do great things together, or even minimal things together. And in a time of national crisis, we're sunk if we don't do better than we're doing now.
Well, that first national crisis comes along with the first secession crisis, and onto the stage strides Andrew Jackson, who is, if Donald Trump has any predicate, and he really doesn't, it's Andrew Jackson is a great disruptor. And the national crisis is that people are threatening to leave the constitutional deal. Where does Jackson come from, Dr. McClay, and what is his response to this crisis?
Well, he's from very hard Scrabble origins. He's really the first example of what, in a I think more noble way, elegant way, Lincoln exemplified this ability of people from even the most unpropitious circumstances to rise to the highest office in the land. He mainly did it through his military exploits, although people do forget that he actually was an elected official, too, before he became president, unlike Trump, who really had none of that, and no military record either. But Jackson was a patriot, and he was a Southerner. He was a slaveholder, but he was also a patriot, and he did not, in the end, cotton to, if I may put it that way, to cotton to the secessionist talk, and so he very firmly, put the kibosh on.
I believe he threatened, did he not, Dr. Arnn, to march down into South Carolina and put them to the sword?
Well, he was a reasonably belligerent.
I like that modifier, reasonably.
Yeah, he'd kill you.
Yeah, he would. He did.
He did kill people. And so, he and John C. Calhoun are there's a great story there. I'm glad that Wilfred said the things he did about Calhoun's excellences, which were many, and his tragedy, and the tragedy for the nation was that he adopted these scientific principles of material historical progress.
Pseudo-scientific.
So a new idea, right? The Declaration of Independence is wrong, right? So that's his tragedy. But boy, with Jackson, he and Jackson, they did things together, right? And they sort of bound up the country and wanted to regard it as one country, and the nationalists, both of them. And they fell to fighting, of course, and the nullification crisis was the reason. And there's that famous toast. Wilfred will remember the words better than I. Jackson proposes a toast. The Union, one and inseparable, something like that, now and forever. And Calhoun toasts back, the Union next to our liberties most dear.
Yeah, exactly.
And the liberty he was referring to was the liberty to hang on to their slaves.
Yeah.
And so the shadow falls. I believe it's in Lecture 8. You call the culture of democracy in the shadow, Dr. McClay. Did anyone not know it had to come to blows, and not just blows, but 600,000 dead and million wounded?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a foreordained conclusion, and I try to convey this in the book, that don't fall for this notion of historical inevitability. I mean, although at the same time I say that if there's anything that made the war inevitable, you could argue it was the Mexican War, because it opened this whole issue of expansion, and expansion leading to reopening the question of slavery in the territories, which is where Lincoln drew the line. If that land, that vast expanse of land, had not become available, and thus unsettled the Missouri Compromise, which ended up being completely blown up by Supreme Court, among others. But we wouldn't have had that problem.
Interesting. I got to pause here because Dr. Arnn and I have spent so much time. Again, if Napoleon hadn't sold us the purchase, that might be the case. But even if he hadn't, and we're into the what ifs, Dr. Arnn, after you read Lincoln enough, you realize someone was going to come along and say that institution cannot endure.
Well, that's right. And, this particular story is written in the history of our college, the founding history. And Lincoln was looking for a way to get rid of slavery without breaking the Constitution or having a war. And they found that way, and that was partly invented by people here at Hillsdale College, and that was they forbid slavery in the federal territories where the federal government had, they claimed, I think rightly, the power to do, but they would leave it alone in the states, and it would be then, and Lincoln said, in the course of ultimate extinction. And so that's the moment of decision, right? Because they were getting the power to implement that policy. They were going to outvote the South on that. And then the South was presented with a choice, right? Are they going to go along with that and resign themselves that this institution must ultimately pass away, or are they going to fight? And alas, they chose to fight. And in many of the states where they chose to fight, that was a narrow decision.
But it was the decision. When we come back, we'll talk about not only the war, which is dealt with in Land of Hope completely, but also the aftermath, the reconstruction. Don't go anywhere, America. The Hillsdale Dialogue will roll along, except over to honorboundcoffee.com, honorboundcoffee.com, supporting military families with 100% of the profits. I prefer the dark roast myself. There are 4 different options at honorboundcoffee.com. 100% of the profits from this operation founded by Pete and Seth Talbot, who also founded relieffactor.com, which I'll mention in a minute. 100% of the profits go to support soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who have defended the liberty that we are talking about from day one, from before day one of the Republic, back when it was the British Empire fighting against the French and the Native Americans in the Cousins War. Honorbound Coffee does that. Please drink your coffee every day and support military families. Go and subscribe at honorboundcoffee.com. And don't forget relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com, the 4 natural supplements you find that you need every single day in your body. Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, omega. Supporting the temporary relief of minor aches and pains as you listen to these Hugh for Hillsdale Dialogues or the Hillsdale Dialogues themselves. When you listen to the courses themselves, you'll feel better if you've got relieffactor.com working on your side. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back with the last segment of the second hour of our 3-part discussion of Land of Hope, the brand new book by Dr. Wilfred McClay. It is the Hugh Hewitt Show. Again, hillsdale.edu for all things Hillsdale, hillsdale.edu, including 25 segments, lectures on hope and freedom. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. It is the Hillsdale Dialogue, the conclusion of part 2 of a 3-part series with Dr. Wilfred McClay, Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College, and Kyle Mernen, the director of online learning at Hillsdale. All things Hillsdale are collected at hillsdale.edu, including a new 25-part course on Dr. McClay's brand new book, Land of Hope, An Invitation to the Great American Story, a great American textbook. I'm so glad we brought up the Mexican-American War because, Dr. McClay, it gets very little notice. It doesn't really figure much in people's understanding of how we got where we are. But without it, there'd be no California, no Texas, no New Mexico, would there?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And by the way, since we've been talking about Lincoln, I want to say a lot of people don't know this, but Mexicans regard Lincoln as a great hero. And partly because of his opposition to the Mexican War. Very interesting, little-known. There are statues of Lincoln all over Mexico.
I did not know that.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Why did he oppose the Mexican War, Dr. Arnn? You're the Lincoln scholar.
Well, he opposed it because he thought it was an aggressive war, and he opposed it because he saw the complications it would make if we got a bunch more territory before we figured out what we're going to do about the slavery thing. And, the context is, Stephen Douglas is gravitating his way toward the idea that we should expand, the whole hemisphere, manifest destiny. And that means that, and he had this kind of federal idea that slavery would be just decided by the local community. And that was, in Lincoln's eyes, the most dangerous doctrine. It actually appealed to Republicans a lot, and because it was, kind of cool. Let each place decide for itself. And he couldn't sustain that in, excuse me, my voice, I got a croak. He couldn't sustain that in debate with Lincoln in the Lincoln-Douglas debates, but it was a very formidable challenge.
Dr. McClay, I want to cover very quickly. When Lincoln, my friend Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor, sent me a note. He had stopped at the Lincoln Memorial on a walk and had read the second inaugural. I'm going to skip over all of the Civil War. I'm going to skip over 600,000 dead and the Eastern Theater, the Western Theater, Lincoln and his generals, all that. I'm sure it's in Land of Hope. But that second inaugural, do you think it is the greatest bit of rhetoric, or do you rank the Gettysburg Address ahead of it?
Oh, I don't know. That's a tough decision. I think I would rate the second inaugural higher because it incorporates, in a way that Lincoln came to later in his life, but it incorporates the Judeo-Christian biblical understanding that is very much a part of the American heritage, as much as our doctrines of natural rights and so on. And he envisions it's this sort of astounding thing to do for a country still at war. But it's conciliatory. It's looking ahead to the knitting back together of the nation, which Lincoln never lost sight of. That was the ultimate. That was the end game.
Well, we'll talk Reconstruction next week. But I got to ask Dr. Arnn, if one of them had been lost to history, which one would you have preferred been kept?
Yeah, I agree with Wilfred. First of all, it's a beautiful religious/political poem, and it gives us a guide to a lot of our contemporary disputes because of this materialistic view of history, where there's a war on everything in the past, everything that's not pure by today's standards, which means nothing will remain. And Lincoln's, it ends, with charity for all, with malice toward none. Let us bind up the nation's wounds. And so, his attitude, sublimely expressed. Remember, the whole beauty of the thing is it is a judgment on us all. We all did this thing. We're a nation. Mm-hmm. Let us, with liberty, every drop of blood is a beautiful statement of natural justice. If every drop of blood drawn by the lash must now be repaid by another drawn by the sword, still it will be said that the ways of God are righteous altogether.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I mean, how can you not like that?
Yeah. Well, No, it's just it's breathtaking, and I years and years of reading it have not taken any of the luster off of it for me.
Do you include the entire text of important documents, Doctor? We got 30 seconds of the break, or how do you approach that as an editor?
I'm so glad you asked about that, because I do point. I don't include entire text, but I do point frequently in the text towards these primary sources, which I think for using the book for teaching is a help. I want to mention very quickly that we're about to come out with a teacher's guide to Land of Hope, which the teachers have been clamoring for, and I think it's going to be a huge help. And it will include some primary documents and questions to use in the classroom, including things like the Northwest Ordinance. Things that aren't often taught.
Absolutely necessary. Hour number 3 will be coming. Do not depart from us or go right away to hillsdale.edu and begin watching all 25. We're only up to less than 11, but I hope we've made it the hook. Don't go anywhere, America. The Hillsdale Dialogue is wonderful. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo.